The North Pacific Dateline region getting active despite the MJO being strongly inactive. I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, December 1st. Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype. If you enjoy the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up down below. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Elliot Harris, Peter Carpenter, Clay Goose, Evolution Moto, Tim Caston, Our Predicament, and Pierre Morton. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. And with that, let's get to work. We're going to start by looking at significant wave heights for the entire planet. Starting in the North Pacific, a series of small gales are in development, seas in the 24-foot range. Not a whole lot of the swell likely expected from these, but certainly something for Hawaii. In the South Pacific, another gale developing southeast of New Zealand. Now, this one only producing 23-foot seas, so probably not a whole lot of surf is expected in the northern hemisphere, but certainly for Tahiti and the French Polynesian Islands. In the North Atlantic, a bit of a gale somewhere off of Sweden and Ireland, but not really supportive of surf production. Quiet pattern in the South Atlantic, and in the Indian Ocean, a gale with 23-foot seas southwest of Southwest and South Australia, offering some hope for swell production. But before we get into all that, let's start by looking at current conditions. We're going to start up off the Pacific Northwest, Grays Harbor, Washington, off the Columbia River there, buoy number 036. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy, all the way up from 33.3 second period, really long period energy, yeah, a tenth of a foot of height there, all the way down to 5 second period pure wind swell. What kind of jumps out is this swell here with period now in 15.4 seconds. This is definitely producing well-rideable surf at spots up in that area with rather clean conditions. Primary swell 4.1 feet at 14.8 seconds from 271 degrees, so pure west swell. Surf height 6 feet estimated, and then some wind swell in the mix there, 3.1 feet at 9.2 seconds. Surf height estimated about 2.9 feet. And the chop height 1 foot, so really pretty clean conditions. Then we go down south, Northern California, Point Reyes buoy, just north of San Francisco there, number 029. A much more prominent swell profile. You can see it right here. Clear peak in the 15 to 16 second period range. Primary swell 6.9 feet at 16 seconds from 283 degrees. Surf height 11.1 feet. Not sure if it was really quite that big, but there were definitely waves if you were at the right place. And if you weren't at the right place, it wasn't quite as big. And incredibly long waits between sets, like one set every half hour. But when the sets came, yeah, there was 6 or 8 waves, or maybe in the morning, 10 or 12 or more sort of thing. And then some secondary swell, 2.2 feet at 12.2 seconds. From 240 degrees. That's just basically noise. And the chop height, 0.9 feet, so really exceptionally clean conditions. A good day for surfing if you had patience. Then we go to Southern California, off of San Diego, the Point Loma South buoy, number 191. Same profile, the first little bits of that swell just starting to hit now, with period in about the 18-second range, and then everything else is pretty much noise behind that. Primary swell 1.8 feet at 18.5 seconds from 283 degrees now. Channel Islands are sort of warping it some. This is really like a 290 degree swell in Northern California and probably 296 down in Southern California. Surf from primary swell 3.3 feet. Some secondary Southern Hemi swell in the mix there, fading from what was a pretty good run of swell over the Thanksgiving holiday, 1.3 feet at 12.8 seconds from 210 degrees. That's only a foot and a half roughly of surf. And chop height, non-existent, so clean conditions indeed. And then finally we go to the North Shore of Oahu, Waimea Bay buoy, number 106. Now this is that same swell, 2 days more into it than in Northern California and almost 3 days relative to Southern California. But still pretty prominent peak there at 13.3 seconds with some wind swell in the mix as well. Primary swell, 6.1 feet, 13.1 seconds from 321 degrees. Surf height, around 8 feet. I didn't look at it today. I was too busy surfing up in Northern California with some secondary swell, 4.5 feet at 10.1 seconds. Chop height, 1 foot. So clean conditions. Basically surf everywhere. Maybe not as big in some locations, but there's swell on the way, and we'll take whatever we can get. All right, so quick trip around the planet, looking at what has happened over the past week. We'll start in the North Pacific, and here is the gale that developed that is making the current swell that one hit Hawaii a couple of days ago, currently reaching California, Northern California primarily. You see sea heights built to 38.8 feet right there, 38.8 feet, the highest seas over this entire domain, aimed well off to the east. Hawaii did quite well on this. Waimea was decent-sized waves on occasion. But notice this is out on the Dateline. This speaks to the title of the video. The Dateline region is active and is forecast to continue to be active, and one would think when you're in the middle of a raging inactive phase of the MJO, this area wouldn't do so well, but apparently it is, and that's a gift. We'll take it. Now notice, Dateline, 2,400 nautical miles out from Northern California. Great for Hawaii, but by the time that swell energy radiates into the coast, it's not surprising to have half-hour waits in between sets because there's virtually no other swell in the water. So it's a lake, and then out of the middle of nowhere, here comes a 10-wave set, all in the, multiple feet overhead range, at least north of Point Reyes. And I guess you'd call that sneaker waves if you're a tourist on the beach. But for surfers, it's, well, you got to have a good wetsuit, and you sit and you hang out and you wait for a while in between sets. And here we are now. We're the whole way up to Sunday. A little tiny gale with 31-foot seas is developing on the Dateline, but that's probably as much as we're going to get. That's mainly going to create swell for Hawaii and maybe background energy into California. Then we go to the South Pacific. We've already had one southern hemi swell that hit over the Thanksgiving Day holiday. And then another gale developed under New Zealand on Monday, the 25th, producing, 33-foot seas, building to 35 feet, again 35 feet on Monday, the 25th of November, and then fading from there. Swell is in the water, pushing northbound, first in for Hawaii, I think on Monday, and then for the South Shore, and then into California as well. That faded out. Now there is another, I wouldn't call it necessarily a swell-producing gale. Yes, it is going to produce swell. Seas are in the 24-foot range, maybe one little spot there at 26 feet. This will mainly be for French Polynesia, Tahiti, and Hawaii should maybe see some background energy from this, but not expecting a whole lot. Another pulse on Saturday developed with 26-foot seas, but you really need 30-foot seas to get anything solid to push up into Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast, so we're thinking probably not a whole lot from that. Over the North Atlantic for the past week, the pattern has been low pressure pushing off the northeast U.S. coast, moving to the central North Atlantic like there, and then you get activity that also flares up here over Europe. Here we are on Friday, the 29th of November, same pattern sort of happening Saturday, and then into Sunday, there's our current situation. Nothing really for the U.S. East Coast or the Gulf of Mexico. Then we go to the South Atlantic. Actually, there is something forecast, but going through the past week, we're just looking at, any wave heights for the past week. It's been a pretty quiet pattern there, so not a whole lot going on for the moment. The future holds some hope, though. And relative to the Indian Ocean, a solid gale developed with, 40 feet. This was a week ago, Sunday the 24th. Swell, and he even went, let's go back there and take a look. It even got up to 42 feet, maybe a little bit more. No, 42 feet. Swell, of course, radiated north from there, has already pushed into Western Australia and Southern Australia. And then another little gale developed on Friday into Saturday, the 30th of November. 29-foot seas, 29.9 feet to be exact for a moment. Swell from that, you can see it right here, poised or if not impacting Western Australia as we speak. So let's go do our deep dive for the North Pacific. We're starting by looking at Jetstream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet to the south, and you see a general sort of gentle troughiness right here. Now, the good news is the jet is fully consolidated with winds 160 knots, 170 knots, pushing off of Japan to the dateline. Trough on the dateline, no big surprise, because when you get a trough, that helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft in the atmosphere and also down the ocean surface. That is the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. As winds get traction on the ocean surface, generate seas. As those seas radiate away from the fetch area, the shorter period elements get groomed out and exposing pure swell, which when hits your beach, of course, turns into surf. So we have a continued gentle trough in the dateline region. As we get into Monday, wind speeds build to 190 knots. That should do something for producing, and you can actually see an upper level circulation here. That should do something for producing surface level gale activity. Then as we get into later Wednesday into Thursday, you see a better trough trying to dig out. We just need some winds to push into that, and there you go. Look at this as we get into late Friday and Saturday, the 7th of December, winds building to 180 knots, just roaring off of Japan, reaching to the dateline, falling south into a trough there. Also notice the trough or the jet sort of splits and then consolidates, pushes into the Pacific Northwest. So maybe some weather up there. But look at this. This is a pretty solid trough indeed, a broad area of 170 to 190 knot winds. That should feed gale development there into we'll say the northwestern Gulf of Alaska. And there we are, 180 hours out. Healthy jet, still split in the east, the dividing line right here north of Hawaii, consolidated west of there, and kind of a mess to the east of there. So we'll see how this plays out, but certainly some area supportive of gale developments looks likely to continue for the dateline. Going down to the surface level pressure, surface level winds. Yes, we see smatterings of 30 knot winds, 35 knot winds, but no really cohesive or organized system until we get into Monday, a broader area of 30 to 35 knot winds setting up from the dateline to a point north of Hawaii. Not a super strong system, but this would be good enough for 12 or 13 second period, some sort of northwest swell for Hawaii, and maybe even small background energy reaching into California, exposed breaks in California and up into the Pacific Northwest. That circulation pattern continues, not super organized even into Thursday. And then as we get to Friday, something interesting starts happening. We have a storm with 50 to 55 knot northwest winds, originally building, falling almost southeast. That just puts a big red target on Hawaii, but also sort of sweeps off to the east. This also then suggests that the U.S. West Coast could come into play with swell production, pushing well off to the east. Now notice this, we're just going to play this. As these winds create traction on the ocean surface, the swell or the raw sea state tries to radiate in front of it. And notice the fetch just keeps pushing over that same area of already agitated sea state. That is good for producing one, a large number of waves per set, and two, longer period swell energy, just given the 55 knot winds that are forecasted there. So that looks pretty good. That gets us into Sunday, a week from now. And then here we go, another some sort of system trying to organize more in the northern Dateline region. We'll see how this all plays out. I mean, a bit of this is still pretty far off into the future. After about 3 or 4 days in the future, I don't know that I trust the models, but they haven't been completely off either at the 5 to 7 day range. So something to keep your eyes on. So what are the effects of those winds on the ocean surface? We have, well, 24-foot seas, 23-foot seas. Now, these are really small fetch areas. You're not going to get anything big out of this, but, you know, sort of you get the sense maybe some continued sort of background swell energy pushing into Hawaii, and maybe eventually the U.S. West Coast. We'll sort of see how this line, if it moves east, that continues into Monday, Tuesday, even into Wednesday to some degree. You see swell energy reaching towards Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. And yet another pulse on Friday with, whoa, let's go see what those seas were there. 26 feet. That all looks good. And then here comes our stronger system, 43-foot seas, 44-foot seas, late Friday, the 6th of December. Continuing at 43 feet into Saturday morning down to 39 feet, fading from there. That looks like a definite burst of long period swell energy targeting Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. And then our next system, smaller and not as organized, but starting to get wound up behind that. Pretty good pattern. Quick look in the southern hemi. Yes, this is what, 23-foot seas. That's, again, the 13-second period barrier. You really need to get like a 16 or 17-second period swell to be able to make the 6,000-mile journey up to the U.S. West Coast. So not a whole lot expected there. Another system evolving, but just crashing right into Antarctica. You're not going to get anything from that. And then another supposedly strong system on Saturday, December 7th. Sea heights 38 feet. Do we get something better than that? 40 feet on Saturday proper, and then holding about there. Now, all this pretty much aimed off to the east. I would think that'd be good for the areas of Peru and Chile. Don't know about anywhere, and the cutoff for Southern California is like 118. Let's go look. Yeah, and it's all falling southeast. So I would say this is a good opportunity for the west coast of South America, but probably not a whole lot else. And let's just get this out, 180 hours, and there we go. North Atlantic, we'll just run through here. The pattern has been pretty much an offshore flow for the east U.S. coast. There you go, a little gale pushing into Ireland on Thursday, the 5th of December. That certainly would create surf, but it's very close to the coast. It'd be a pretty raw sea state to just, you know, mildly understate it. More energy pushing down from the north. Again, whoops, there we go, 180 hours out. So the target, Europe, but pretty stormy. South Atlantic, we'll put this into motion. Not a whole lot happening. Then you get into Tuesday, the 3rd of December. Some sort of gale tries to organize with, what's it, about 35-foot seas. Really, this one here, this guy's just pushing right towards Antarctica. So, yeah, about 35-foot seas, pretty long ways away from South Africa. But then additional fetch following on, making a better footprint as it pushes across the South Atlantic. Certainly good for swell into these regions. And then another one develops, and this one much stronger. Check this out. Now, again, we're 162 hours out. 46-foot seas, 47-foot seas in December. Really? Well, I mean, if that happens, that would be great. But I'll leave the South Atlantic image. Leave that burned into your mind. We'll see if it materializes, but it certainly is a big tease. And then finally, the Indian Ocean. We'll put this into motion. Not a whole lot happening, at least in the short term, but then you get out to about Thursday, the 5th of December. Little gale tries to develop there, 32-foot seas. Nothing super impressive when we're already out a week now, so that looks like about it. So the wind forecast for Hawaii here and California, Point Conception there, San Francisco there, up into the Pacific Northwest. Right now, very light winds in control, both for Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. The jet stream doing this, you can just literally assume where the jet stream is based on what the wind pattern is doing here and the low pressure pattern. As we get into Monday, really no change, though notice some form of like south winds here, depending. It's trades down for the Big Island, but maybe south winds for Oahu. As we get into Tuesday, light wind regime for California. Again, that kind of, it looks like a cold front getting ready to dangle down over the Hawaiian Islands, so some flavor of south winds. Wednesday, more of the same. Notice low pressure trying to organize north of Hawaii. Light wind regime for California. Thursday, high pressure tries to build a little. You see some smatterings of 15-knot northwest winds off of central California. Look at the front coming dangerously close to Hawaii. Still that mix of sort of trades and some flavor of south winds. Friday, looks like the front pushes through northwest winds. Not strong, 15 knots. High pressure building off California. Winds start to pick up a little bit. Saturday, not too bad for California. Here come the trades for the Hawaiian Islands. Bigger system building in the northwestern Gulf, and we're into Sunday. Now look, high pressure 1034 millibars just nuking down all the California coast. A broad fetch of east trades at 15 to almost 20 knots, probably generating wind swell for east-facing shores of the Hawaiian Islands a day out, but a relatively light wind pattern for the Hawaiian Islands. And then we're into, we'll just go to 180 hours out. Nuking offshore wind pattern for northern, or like Cape Mendocino, but it's probably north winds down the coast here. We'll see how this all plays out. A week out, I don't believe any of it. Precipitation forecast for California right here. We know the jet stream is basically supposed to be taking a laser focus on the Pacific Northwest. You see the snow line here. It's even north of Vancouver Island, so like Whistler and those areas are completely out of the mix, locked out. The rain continuing to focus north of Vancouver Island until you get to about Thursday, and then a first little pulse of rain coming in. I don't really see, it must be warmer temperatures. There's a little bit of snow in the high mountains. And then all of a sudden, Washington and Oregon get into play, but it does not look cold. It almost looks like rain everywhere, even up in the mountains, even into British Columbia sort of situation, a warm regime. Then there must be some cold air getting into the mix there. Then all of a sudden, a good burst of snow on Saturday, the 7th of December. That washes out. High pressure just fully locking down everything. Yeah, a little bit of rain maybe for extreme Northern California, but for the most part, nada, nothing. A dry pattern, dry, typical La Nina, high pressure locked over the Great Basin sort of pattern, offshore winds for the most part, for at least for California, pretty typical of La Nina. The snow forecast dashboard, we're going to just look at one location. We'll do Palisades, Tahoe, formerly Squaw Valley. Nary a drop of snow to be seen. That said, they did get, from what I've been able to tell, about a good 3-foot base above 8,000 feet in the Sierra, in the Tahoe region. And that hasn't enabled Palisades to open up a bunch of their blue and green territory, which is good. Now, with no snow forecast, it's going to be pretty much sticking to the groomers only. Let's take a quick look here at snow levels or freeze level. The white is 32 degrees, the gray is sleet, so above 32 degrees. See the freeze line right now at 10,000 feet, slowly inching its way up to 12,000 feet by December 5th. Maybe a little dip there, but more of the same, so very high snow levels. That suggests warm temperatures, both down by the coast and aloft, and just no snow. So, and with the pattern, the Dateline pattern, sort of suggests that, well, the focus for right now maybe should be surfing. So, surf forecast for a couple of locations. Columbia River, north, the borderline between Washington, Oregon. 7-foot surf as we get into early Monday, slowly fading down through the work week into Wednesday. Starts stepping up a little bit as we get into Thursday, and then a little bit of a random, but definitely surf the whole way through the week. Winds blowing out of the south hard on Friday. As we get into Saturday, things lighten up, so maybe there's a window there. Swell heights currently 5 feet in the 14-15 second range for Monday, then dribbling down from there. Another little pulse of energy, that background sort of swell energy I was talking about, come from the Dateline. 4 feet at 12 seconds, 6 feet at 12 to 13 seconds, and then you're into the, we'll say 6-foot range at 12 to 13 seconds. So not a bad setup for the Pacific Northwest. Ocean Beach, San Francisco, 7-foot surf on Monday, working its way down as we get into Wednesday. Same pattern as the Pacific Northwest. Then it comes up again. 4 foot, 6 foot, pretty much 6 foot the whole way through. Winds, well, let's see. Northeast, little bit northerly. Pretty steady northwest. Now, this is off the coast a little bit, so near shore probably okay. But then you get into Sunday, and it looks like a northwest wind event that'll drop water temperatures 20 to 25 knots, but pretty much limited to just one day. Swell heights, 4.5 feet at 15 seconds on Monday morning, slowly heading down, then back up into the 4 foot at 12 seconds, 4.5 feet at 12 to 13 seconds, going on forever. There's going to be waves. San Diego, 3 feet, surf heading down as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, then coming up a little bit, 2.5 feet. I think there might be some southern hemi swell buried in here somewhere, but for the most part, then if there's northwest swell, you'll have a hard time seeing it unless you're at a very protected spot. 2.5 foot surf maybe coming up a bit as we get a week out. Wind speeds, non-existent for the most part. That's the joy of Southern California. Here you go. Swell heights, 1.8 feet at 16 to 17 seconds first thing Monday morning. Just slowly the period dropping off. Another little pulse. Here's your southern hemi swell, 1.2, 1.3 feet at 17 to 18 seconds. So that's, 2 foot kind of surf, 2.5 foot surf. That continues through the week until you get some more additional background swell coming in. North shore of Oahu, yes, the existing swell fading from 5 feet on Monday morning, but then you see surf heights going up to 6.5 feet on Tuesday. 6 to 7 feet on Wednesday into Thursday, and then up to 12 feet as we get into Friday, Saturday, and another pulse at 10 feet. Winds, well, you have that, here's that south wind thing we were talking about, 8 to 10 knots. I mean, maybe not too bad if you got a good protected spot. And then they go to sort of the northwest direction on Wednesday, but then turn into trades and things cleaning up quite a bit. Swell heights fading from 5 feet at 11 to 12 seconds, and then 4 to 5 feet at 12 seconds, 5 to 6 feet at 12 seconds, 9 feet at 13 seconds, 6 feet. I mean, that's just a long run of surf. That is nothing to complain about. And one last stop, we'll go over to Bali because there's a bit of energy there forecast for the for this Indian Ocean. Surf heights 7.5 feet going up to 9 feet on Wednesday, and then just continuing head high or better or right off the charts with steady, I'd call it trade winds. So it looks like there's some bit of a wind event, 20 knot westerly winds as we get into Saturday and Sunday. Swell heights 5 feet at 14 seconds, 6 feet at 14 seconds, fading down to 5 feet at 12 to 13 seconds, and then fading from there. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and so the El Nino Southern Oscillation? These two oscillations are the major contributors to whether there's going to be surf and or snow and rain at least in the Pacific Basin. We'll start with the MJO discussion, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases to it, the active phase and the inactive phase. The active phase is our friend. It's like a low-pressure system. The MJO moves from west to east, the active and the inactive phase, one on each side of the planet, rotating west to east around the planet on the equator. When the active phase moves into your general location, like in this case, the Pacific, then what it tends to do is take warm, moist air at the ocean surface, lift it aloft. That gets caught by the jet stream. It feeds the jet stream and making a stronger jet stream flow, just like what we saw in the Pacific Basin. That in turn feeds storm and gale production. The inactive phase is like a high pressure system. It just shuts things off. No flow of energy up into the jet stream, a weaker split jet stream that is not capable of supporting troughing and therefore not producing surf. All right, so what the active phase, let me try before I do that. The active phase of the MJO, generally, because it's low pressure, it dampens trade winds, while the inactive phase of the MJO, it being like a high pressure system, trade winds are made from high pressure, it feeds trade wind production. So trade winds generally come out of the east on the equator. Okay, and in this chart, they would be symbolized by blues and purple colors. If you see that, that is the inactive phase of the MJO. Likewise, the active phase of the MJO supports westerly anomalies. It dampens trade winds. So when you see the reds, that would probably be where the active phase is, and this would be where the inactive phase is. Now, how do I read this chart? Well, 180 is the dateline, so running right up the middle here. So that's in the Pacific Ocean. The far west Pacific starts about 125 east, so right there. So, and this is the whole planet, and this is past performance here. And you see starting around the 11th of November, just nuking east winds with westerly winds building over Bali and the maritime continent and the Indian Ocean area. So this looks like inactive phase of the MJO over the dateline, and yet we saw the models, and they are showing good winds pushing into the dateline and reasonably good support for gale development on the dateline. So how can that be? Well, see this? Westerly winds over the maritime continent, that momentum likely carries in the jet stream somewhere out to the dateline or a bit east of the dateline. And remember when you saw the jet stream charts, once the jet stream got to about a point north of Hawaii, which would be right about here, the jet stream split. So it's not locked exactly. There's a downstream effect. Consider the jet stream like a river. It flows over this area here from west to east, picks up all kinds of energy. That momentum carries it to, say, here, before finally these easterly anomalies in the at the surface affect what's going on in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and the jet stream splits and falls apart. So that's so this is what's happened. This is the forecast, basically no change from here forward. Keep that in your mind. Let's move on. Outgoing long wave radiation charts, just fancy words for cloud cover. Is there more cloud cover than normal? And if there is, why would that be? Well, that's probably because you have the active phase of the MJO pumping warm, moist air aloft. It hits upper levels of the atmosphere that are cold. It condenses and forms more clouds than normal. So that the blues are cloudier than normal. The oranges, less cloudier than normal. This would be like the inactive phase of the MJO. This would be the active phase of the MJO. No big surprise from the chart we just saw. Maritime continent, right there, Indian Ocean. That's where all the west anomalies are. That's where the active phase of the MJO is. And then you see the inactive phase of the MJO basically, well, there's Hawaii right there. So on the equator, south of Hawaii, this per the statistic model, this is a statistic model. It basically shows the active phase of the MJO slowly, 5 days from now, 10 days, 15 days from now, about 2 weeks, inching into the far west Pacific while the inactive phase of the MJO completely falters. The GEFS model, the GFS ensemble model, though, shows the active phase of the MJO really not making as much eastward progress. There is the statistic model, there's the dynamic model, and it's showing this inactive phase thing just hanging south of Hawaii the whole time, where the statistic model shows it weakening. So a bit of a generalized split in the models, though. You know, we're talking shades of gray. How far is the active phase moving into the Pacific over the next 2 weeks? This says virtually not at all. And this says, oh, maybe 1,000 miles into it or so. Let's dig deeper. Phase diagrams for those two models, these just show you where the active phase of the MJO is, right there where the heavy dot is. But how do you read this? Well, the MJO moves from the west to east, from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, to the West Pacific, East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. That's where it is right now. The further the dot is from this circle, the stronger it is. So a moderate active phase of the MJO over the Maritime Continent today. No big surprise. Everything we saw before that supports that. This model, the statistic model, suggests it making it to the West Pacific, split between moderate still and weak. The dynamic model over here suggests, well, let's see, it basically making it nowhere and crashing over the Maritime Continent, then rebounding 2 weeks from now, but still not even making it into the West Pacific. So the statistic model suggests, just like we saw in the previous charts, maybe making it to the West Pacific. Dynamic model says, nope, stuck over the Maritime Continent for now. Another a statistic model showing upper level flow. So I'm showing this not because I really believe it's correct, but it sort of shows the difference in the models. Greens, areas favorable for precipitations. Oranges and reds, not favorable. Active phase or inactive phase. South America there, New Guinea there, the equator right there, the dateline roughly there. Each plot is 5 days long, going for 8 panels, 40 days out, so a little over a month. This shows active phase, moisture over the Maritime Continent, moving into the West Pacific on December 6th, over the Pacific December 11th, and over the dateline by about the 18th of December, then fading out, inactive phase coming behind that. I would say this is probably not particularly accurate, just given it how the westerly anomalies and the pattern just seems locked over the Maritime Continent, at least for the time being. Let's keep digging. Yet another MJO chart, but this actually shows you the actual MJO, the dark contour, and dateline right up the middle. Here we go. Far West Pacific starts here at 125 West. You see a weak inactive phase in October, a building active phase later in October. And here is our current strong inactive phase with nuking east anomalies. And the real question is, when is this thing going to end? When is it going to get dislodged? Or is there something else going on? We'll talk about that. But for the moment, here is today's date. We've had easterly anomalies since pretty much the beginning of November. Inactive phase, the dotted contour clearly delineated here. Another strong bout of easterly anomalies forecast the whole way into about December, I'd say even 21st, something like that. And then theoretically, the east anomalies fade. This model has been back and forth. To now it's showing the active phase of the MJO still today over the Maritime Continent. That's right where it should be. But it's the contours of it making its way into the West Pacific, and west anomalies making it to 150 west. That'd be great because downstream momentum will feed the Jetstream. And, then you should theoretically have storm. It should be like the storm door should be knocking on California, maybe 600 or 700 miles out off the coast, but not actually pushing inland. That should be great for producing storm production over the Dateline region. And it's doing that already, so one would think it would only get enhanced as we go over the next month. And then finally, the CFS model going out 3 months. This is past performance down here. This is the forecast. Look at that big, I mean, I haven't seen east anomalies that strong on any chart in a long, long time. So this is a major easterly wind event, this would be a feeder of La Nina. And we'll get into that discussion in a bit, but you know, we've kind of been in La Nina, but it's kind of been very mixed signals at best. But this looks like just dumping gas on the fire. This is right on the dateline right there. So east anomalies, forecast in control. West Pacific starts right about there until into about mid-December or so. And then you get to Christmas and westerly anomalies make it pretty far into the Pacific, maybe even crossing over the dateline there as we get in the New Year's time frame. Then the west anomalies fade. Some flavor of moderate easterly anomalies continue over the eastern two-thirds of the Pacific sort of thing. Let's overlay the MJO. All right, so dotted contour. There's our strong active phase of the MJO. And apparently starting about 3 or 4 days from now and going for about a week, that'll be the peak of this inactive phase, as the active phase is already making headway into the West Pacific, and it too is going to be equally, if not stronger, than this inactive phase. So this would be a big target somewhere in here between, we'll say, mid-December into, maybe mid-January sort of thing. Great big target for storm production over the oceans. California at 120 west. Notice the active phase and westerly anomalies pushing south of California. This would be a target for rain and precipitation. But after that, according to this, everything just falls apart. And we went from this weak MJO signal to building and then just peaking strong in January, and then it all falls apart. I don't know if I completely believe that. Let's overlay the low pass filter here. This is a higher low pressure bias. No big surprises here. Pretty much the same as last week. Low pressure bias over the maritime continent. High pressure bias with one contour over the dateline. Forecast building to 2 contours. Then holding. This is your La Nina signal. This is your El Nino signal. It would be El Nino if it was over the dateline, but no, it's not. It is over the maritime continent. Forecast holding solid with the La Nina signal building, being fueled, I'm sure, by easterly anomalies here, giving it some momentum. This is another way of visualizing the moisture content over time. This goes back a year ago. Dateline runs right up the middle. The blues are wetter than normal skies. This is your El Nino signal back last winter in December, January, February. Not a very strong signal at all, but it was there. We get into the summer, kind of patchy, but here you go in October. Building clear skies over the dateline region starting in mid-September, and here we are today in the 1st of December, and a much stronger footprint of dry upper air suggestive of La Nina's development. Real quick here, what's going on in the oceans down subsurface? This is the West Pacific. This is the East Pacific. This is data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. These are the anchors on those buoys. The X's are sensors on those anchors. They give us a profile of what's going on subsurface water temperature-wise. Warm water in the West Pacific. The 30-degree isotherm is now gone, suggesting these temperatures are not getting any warmer. The 29-degree isotherm was at 180. It's backtracking, suggesting trades are stronger than they've been. The 28-degree isotherm was at 170. It's backtracking. And the 24-degree isotherm all but gone in the far East Pacific, suggesting water is getting colder, trades are building and pushing whatever warm water there is into the West Pacific. This is a pretty typical La Nina kind of pattern. But it is not the actual temperatures, it is the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. Yes, you have a cold pocket here from about, a point south of Hawaii or so, pushing into the east, but not markedly cold. And these surface temperatures, they're just 0 means pretty much normal. So there's no big, strong La Nina signal here in this chart. Let's go look at another chart. This chart uses that same data plus some satellite data. You can see the cold upwelling pattern here leaching to the surface in the far East Pacific. But notice there's a good area of building warm temperatures here in the West Pacific, suggestive that La Nina doesn't really have that big of a footprint. You know, and you notice we saw the westerly anomalies here and over like the far over the maritime continent, and that's pushing warm water from the maritime continent into the far West Pacific. It doesn't make it far because it's got easterly anomalies blowing into it, giving it headway, but La Nina is all driven by colder water temperatures in the East Pacific. And yeah, we have it, but not super strong. In fact, here's the satellite data used to feed that a chart. This is from the Jason 3 satellite, and basically it's just showing the height of the ocean. Strip out the waves, wind waves, the tides. Is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? Why does that matter? Cold water at depth contracts. If it contracts, the ocean surface is going to dip in response. Likewise, if you have warm water at depth, it expands. It displaces the water above it up a little bit. All right, so let's take a look at this chart, see if we can make some sense of it. This is Chile, Peru, Ecuador. There's the equator. Dateline right there, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea there. It's all that matters is 5 degrees north and south of the equator. Well, there is the Galapagos Islands right there. Notice we only have 5 centimeter, minus 5 centimeter anomalies. So the ocean is lower than normal, suggesting cold water at depth, but there was a broad expanse of minus 10 and at one point even 15 centimeter anomalies. That's all gone. And also note, historically, right around now is the peak of La Nina. So this does not look like some screaming La Nina signal. It looks pretty much like it's there, but it's not that big of a deal. And when you see these positive anomalies all bunched up over here, yeah, that does definitely describe a La Nina pattern. Easterly anomalies scouring off warm water, pushing it all here. But if you have over here in the maritime continent, westerly anomalies taking warm water in all the shallowness there and dumping it out into the Pacific. So it all sort of pools here. And then you got this dividing line literally on the dateline at the ocean surface, suggesting warm, cold, and then you got the jet stream raging on top of that, making progress to a point about south of Hawaii or over Hawaii. So all this sort of fits with, yeah, we're in La Nina, but whatever La Nina is, it's pretty weak, limited to the East Pacific, and it's not like doing a full basin-wide, just mammoth controlling sort of situation, at least not yet. Let's keep digging. Sea surface temperature anomalies. So here is the equator right there, South America, North America, Australia, you get it. Dateline running right there. The blue's colder than normal temperatures. So there you can see a bit of cool, deeper cool, and the cool pool goes pretty much the whole way across the Pacific. But then look at this, all this warm water in the far west. When I talked about warmer temperatures here, if you're active phase of the MJO is here, if your low pressure bias is over here, you get westerly anomalies. They take all this is all shallow in here, warm water, dumps it, runs it through these islands, dumps it out into here. And then there's that dividing line. You could literally just visualize easterly anomalies making it here, westerly anomalies, and a current pushing to here. There's your brick wall. It sort of limits the strength of what La Nina can do. It's almost like the Pacific is torn half between El Nino, half between La Nina. If the signal was more concentrated in the Indian Ocean and this was all blue over here, we'd be in a lot different situation. But it doesn't appear that's what's going on. The 7-day trend, you see cooling waters off of the Galapagos here in Ecuador, pockets. I think it started last week when we looked at this, and that's been continuing to be the case. No warming here, but No big surprise. The inactive phase of the MJO is in control. Easterly trades are nuking. It would not be surprising there's a bunch of upwelling here, but it's also noticeable that there's not a big pool of cool water subsurface to support any massive upwelling patterns. So I don't know what to make of all this for right now. Let's dig a little deeper. Here's our trend line for temperatures in the Nino 1.2 region, the far east Pacific, near Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands. Again, just 5 degrees north and south of the equator. Temperatures had been, since September, down around 1 to 1.5 degrees below normal. We got this big spike here in November as the active phase was making its way across the Pacific. No big surprise. It brings westerly anomalies with it, or at least dampens trade winds. Water temperatures warm up because the sun can beat down on it. But now, here we go. Temperatures falling off today, 699 thousandths, basically 3/4 of a degree below normal. Then we go to the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 index. This is temperatures on the equator from a point south of California out to about the dateline. Temperatures today, 803 thousandths of a degree below normal, 3/4 of a degree. Half a degree and above to plus is considered neutral normal. Half a degree to 1 degree is considered weak La Nina, and that's about where it looks like we are as of right now. Let's keep going. Weekly temperature values right here. This is corrected. This is for the Nino 3.4 region. We saw what that said. What was it, like minus 3/4 of a degree? This says temperatures are minus 0.1 degree for the week of November 20th. You go back here, the most they've ever been is half a degree below normal. Now, I think this is highly suspicious. I don't believe this. And I think this is corrected. They're trying to, because the planet keeps warming, they're trying to somehow figure out, well, what's the new normal? And are we above or below the new normal? And I think this is overcompensated for whatever. And I honestly think that we're down at like minus half a degree or something like that. And then we're going to go back. This is subsurface temperatures over time, but it sort of speaks to the same thing that's going on the surface. This was back last year. Cold water, the beginnings of La Nina developed in the West Pacific, the last of the Kelvin waves and warm water from our El Nino there, making it across the Pacific. Then you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cold water Kelvin waves making it across the Pacific into September. But here we are right now. Things, just as pretty much almost neutral. Yes, you see the building warm pool in the west, but you see this cool pool, not that cool. We're supposedly at the peak of La Nina, but that's typically happens between Thanksgiving and Christmas, mainly more Thanksgiving, and it has no momentum at all. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? We look at the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Tahiti and Darwin. I think there's been somebody there with a barometer for the past 200 years measuring every day, more or less. Anyway, when pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index would be negative. Today it's plus 202. Okay, and typically during the active phase of the MJO, that drops pressure at Tahiti. During El Nino, pressure drops significantly in Tahiti, and Darwin, pressure rises. Okay, we're in a flip now, supposedly. Higher pressure over higher pressure over Tahiti, lower pressure over Darwin, with a low pressure bias being over, the maritime continent. But you go back here, daily numbers. Yeah, here's our kind of a spurt of positive numbers, but it's been going for 18 days now. Prior to that, it was negative, but I don't know. Let's look at the 30-day average. That gives us a trend line. Okay, 6.92, So we've been positive, and where were we a month ago? If this were up at 15 or 20, that'd be screaming La Nina. This is just saying a general tendency towards La Nina at best. The 90-day average takes all the MJO stuff out of it, plus 3.61. That's effectively neutral. Where were we a month ago? 3.83. And this is hundreds of years of record, and that best I know, there is no like, okay, let's make adjustments for a warming planet or any of this. It's just pretty much hard numbers. And it's saying we're neutral. Let's look at a graph. Here's a 30-day running SOI graphed out for you. Okay, you can see here was our El Nino in June and supposedly of last year. And then here we have been just bopping around. Neutral is the white. This is La Nina. This is El Nino. Now we're just starting to trend up, but we've trended up before and not really. This is La Nina back when we were in that 3-year La Nina. Right now, we're dead even. Kind of interesting. Here is the PDF corrected version of sea surface temperature anomaly forecast for the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. You can see temperatures during our El Nino last year up to 2 degrees have been steadily falling. Last verified bit of data we had here, this says minus half a degree, and that was in, let's see, that was about mid-November. The forecast, the CFS model just has it falling hard down to 1.1 degree below normal. This is all, I think, attributable to the CFS model saying nuking easterly anomalies for the next 3 weeks. Will this really result in this big of a dip? Last week, we looked at the consensus model forecast. You can go find that. Go look at last week's video. All the other models are saying, we're going to hang around half a degree, maybe 0.6 of a degree below normal, which is just barely La Nina. This seems, I mean, the CFS model, this version is lock solid there. And notice it shows temperatures pretty much returning to half a degree or less, so neutral as we get into April. This will be an exceedingly weak La Nina if it plays out even like this. After an exceedingly weak El Nino the season before it, I guess we'll see how this plays out. But for right now, short term, the models are suggesting kind of I'll call it a weak stormy pattern over the dateline for the next 5 days or so, but then possibly another pretty solid gale over the dateline, making some good longer period swell, maybe similar to what we're seeing right now. South of Point Conception, yeah, I know it's not what you want. The storm track is too far to the north still to really get good exposure into Southern California and down into Baja. But we're kind of at the point where we'll take anything we can get. So the models are teasing us long term, this whole bit of, well, are we going deep into La Nina? Well, we're supposedly historically at the peak of La Nina here. Yeah, we have a major easterly wind event that is occurring and forecast to continue to occur for another 2 to 3 weeks. But my attitude is one easterly wind burst does not make La Nina. And if anything, you look at the trend and in the ocean surface waters, and it just keeps getting warmer and warmer, not cooler, suggesting La Nina is not getting traction. Yes, this easterly wind event will probably give it a little bit of momentum, but it takes months of sustained easterly anomalies to make a real strong La Nina. I don't think we're going there. That said, sort of looking at the longer arc of things, how's this winter going to go out? Well, on a 1 to 10 scale from a surf perspective, 10 being the best and 1 being horrible, I gave this year a 3.5. You can see it on the website in our long-term El Nino forecast. Stormsurf.com if you didn't know where this was coming from. So surf-wise, not a great surf pattern given not the exact La Nina that's happening, but just this general La Nina-ish pattern that's set up over the Pacific. I mean, if the low pressure bias is over the maritime continent, you gotta just say the scales are tipped in favor of La Nina. But all said and done, it doesn't seem like that strong of a La Nina. I'm hoping we will get this year, we'll just sort of get it out of our system, and then next year maybe return to neutral. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. I mean, you all seem to come up with some pretty good ideas, so I want to hear what you have to say. Write it up down below. I'd really appreciate it. And other than that, rainfall into California. I mean, I was hoping for 85% of normal. I don't know if we're going to get there or not. We'll just have to see. That's an open door. But if you're planning ski trips, definitely under La Nina, you tend to want to go further north rather than further south. But we'll see how it all plays out. Good active phase of the MJO pushing into California could make a whole lot of difference real quick, and that's what it looks like is going to happen as we get later into January, so we'll see. All right, that's the end of the video for this week. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Get yourself all signed up. Comments and questions welcome. And if you'd like to make a small donation, a contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, we are done for this week. We will do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.